The American Barn. More than just a building. It is a witness to centuries of change, a symbol of a way of life that stretched across this great nation. It owns a part of the American landscape. They stand tall. They stand proud. Barns originally served as farm factories, places of business, a storehouse for essential equipment and supplies, and shelter for animals. Farmers threshed grain, stored hay for the livestock, and even entertained on occasions. The barn was also the heart of the farm and a vital center of community life. To farmers, barns were as essential as the houses they lived in. To many of us, barns represent tradition, hard work, and independence. The barn remains a powerful symbol, even as it disappears from the American landscape.
This barn was built by my great-grandfather back in the late 1800s. Actually, I think it was about 1887 and 1888 that the barn was built, and then it was painted in 1889. At this time, the town of Danbury was located here. This barn is built in 2 levels. The bottom layer has got stonework up to where the floor of the haymow part would be, and the upper part has got floor in it, and at that point, why, hay and grain for the livestock was stored, and wagons could be pulled into the upper part from the upper level. This barn was constructed with timbers, and there were mortise and tenon joints on the framework that were held together with wooden pegs. This is probably one of the few barns standing in the state that still has the wooden peg construction. This was typical of the construction back at that time, but it was also very sturdy and has lasted through the years. We've still used the barn for just mostly equipment storage now. We'd like to fix it up, but times being what they are, why, it's not practical. My great-grandfather homesteaded this place back in the 1870s, and he and his brother, Barnett Ashton, Jesse Ashton was my grandfather, and Barnett Ashton was his brother, came back from Indiana, and they introduced alfalfa in this area. They carried some alfalfa seed back in the vest pocket, and they planted the seeds and increased until they was at one time called the Alfalfa Kings of Nebraska. When the railroad came through, they actually shipped alfalfa seed out by the train car loads.
Southwest Nebraska is host to many barns. This barn stands on ground southeast of McCook. It was built around 1910 by August Nothnagel and Sons. The main part was used for feeding workhorses and mules, while the east lean-to was mainly used for milking cows. In 1942, the farm was sold, and the new owners, Jack and Margaret Milbauer, used the barn for feeding registered Hereford bulls. Today, the barn is not in use for livestock, but kept in repair. In essence, a barn again. David McDowell, at age 22, with the help of Jim Trissell, built this barn in 1916. The stalls accommodated 6 teams of workhorses. The north side was used for livestock shelter and later converted to a milk barn for 12 head of milk cows. In the fall, when the farm work was all done, dances were held with music by fiddle and banjo players. Musicians Perry Kinnison and John Jones were the hit of the event. The barn was painted in 1975 with a new roof. Now the barn is full of memories of days gone by, including 2 restored John Deere tractors. South of Indianola stands a round roof barn, popular after World War I. Originally built by Andrew Malik between 1922 and 1925, it still remains in the Malik family today, and still standing almost like it was years ago. The tiles were imported to McCook on the train and then brought to the farm site for construction. Standing 40 feet tall, this structure was also known as the Gothic roof barn, designed to admit natural light and to provide a large space for hay storage.
In about 1885, my great-grandfather, Philip Borman, immigrated from Odessa, Russia, and so he and his sister came to this country. He built a granary and a sod house and some kind of a lean-to type of barn to begin with, and cultivated the ground to fill the act. And then later, in about 1918, he built this barn, and it's been in the family for well over 100 years. And in 1889, he fulfilled his homestead agreement, and so this barn dates back to a period just after that, about 1918, I suspect, that this was built. In the 1920s, John Beebe lived on this place, and he had this barn built. And in recent times, the last 5 years, I've owned the building. But we have used the barn for several events. We've had some parties here. My daughter's senior graduation party with her class, and we've had a birthday party for my brother. And I intend to use the barn and the farmstead as a place where I can have reunion celebrations and other events. And I want to keep the buildings preserved and use them in that manner.
barn was built in 1916 by a fellow that used to live in McCook. This was Fred Martin was the main carpenter, and my dad was doing the farming and building the barns at the same time. And this barn probably was all hauled out here with a team and wagon. And the foundation was built with bank sand, so it had been deteriorating because that bank sand had gravel or had sand in it. And at that time they didn't have any water washed gravel. And this barn, at one time, we used to have at least 3 6-horse teams in the field at one time. So the barn would accommodate the horses, and besides we had one team eating out of a wagon box on the outside the barn so we could get all the horses fed. And the barn is 40 foot tall. In 1950 or 51, I rebuilt the barn into a granary with a belt and a leg in it. So consequently, we've taken pretty good care of the barn. And so now it's used for just storage.
Variety of barns are found in southwest Nebraska. Barns are the result of fusion of ideas from different cultures. We may see the cattle and hay barn, the dairy barn, western barn, and occasionally the round barn. But don't be surprised to find a regional barn where you don't expect it. Family tradition still exists in these parts of the country. Here, the Reiner's Barn still stands since its construction in the early 1900s. The most common style is the cattle and hay barn, used for storing hay and protecting livestock. It was once said that haymows were a place for social gatherings. On a good night, local folks could take in several barn dances around the area. The barns of southwest Nebraska, standing tall and standing proud. While some barns wait patiently for restoration, others shine brightly in the American heartland. Agriculture has been transformed during the last 2 centuries. The role of the barn has changed. Grain, once threshed by hand, is now processed in the field by machine. Barn lofts that once stored hay for livestock have been rendered obsolete by baling machines. Milking parlors are now the exclusive operation for dairy companies. Barns still play a vital role in today's farming organization, but only after renovation has been made to meet today's farming needs. What is the future of the American barn? We will help determine the answer, but one thing still remains. The American barn is a symbol of the choices we make about our future. So to you, the barn, stand proud. You're an American icon.